Welcome to the Infinite Creative Podcast. This is Sean, and I am
Fitz.
in-person podcasting is a little bit different, I would say, than like, it's over the phone.
Oh yeah. No, I prefer it. I mean, really, it's so much nicer in person. But yeah, no worries, everyone. We're gonna add the awkward pauses. We'll maybe even have some bugs like we do on the regular podcast. We really want to make this as real as the usual experience. Exactly.
Yeah, I completely feel that. Well, I'm more than stoked to say that you're back in town because Florida is where it's at. And if you don't know, we live in St. Petersburg, Florida right now. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we're kind of podcasting here with our setup. It's a little bit of a newer setup, so everything changed a little bit. So that's why we're a little bit, this is different how we do this. Mm-hmm. But we're going to do this. Or?
Yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to roll through it like we always do. Yeah, just talking about just a bunch of different stuff today, really, right? I think, there's been just client work on both our ends. I think we're both in a funny place. We're both in this kind of, we got to quadruple our business. We got to get money. Yeah. I think a lot of people can probably relate to that. We're in this place of not really knowing what's next.
Yeah. So. We only know what definitely should be next, and that's money, and that is like one of the weirdest and scariest places, and you're like, okay, I want to do this, and it kind of works, but it's not working well enough. And I'm just like, how do we make this now obviously work well? Because it's a recession. Everything goes like not so smooth as it should go sometimes. And yeah, I think this episode we talk a little bit about how to make this more smooth and what are actionable tips that we recommend of doing. And obviously there's some things that we don't know and other people obviously know, so take everything with a grain of salt, and maybe if you have more tips, add them in the comments below, because we're a community of freelancers and it's really important for us to like basically give back to you guys, but also receive, so we all can thrive.
Yeah, exactly. So so I guess we'll kind of just jump into some stuff. So I think we both have talked about this, just the importance of networking and stuff, but I feel like you have a lot of stuff to share at events. You go to a lot of events as a videographer. I think you're constantly kind of out there passing around cards, doing things like that. So I wanted to get kind of some of your feedback on like people out there, so let's say, I go to a networking event. Let's say I did all of that perfectly. I get to the event. I'm there. What would be your suggestions to people? Like, let's say I don't know anyone in the room. How do you make it so you go to you don't just go to a networking event, but you actually get your business cards in people's hands? You somehow...
Yeah, I feel like the first thing is like you kind of have to know nobody wants to be there. They all want to be there, and at the same time, they feel socially awkward. Some people thrive in that situation, some people don't. Most people are introverts, and they kind of want to avoid danger. And the extroverts, they are basically like annoying the introverts. So it's like, it's a weird balance. So nobody really wants to be there, and everybody feels like I'm being judged. And that is just the natural giving, I feel like. So... Yeah. I think when you want to get the most out of it, I forgot the book, but there's like a book about business and networking. Have goals. Like, let's say whatever the goal is, like, okay, I want to talk to 2 people today, and maybe hand out a business card, and then maybe you can step up the game for the next networking event. But that's basically what I usually do. Like, okay, I've tried to be myself and have like little goals that are like not annoying to other people and trying to be of value and listen more.
Oh, yeah. Well, the only thing I would maybe add to that is, I think one thing that I kind of suggest people is have your elevator pitch ready, right? I mean, there's some
one-liner.
Especially with creatives, right? I mean, we do so much where we could just get lost talking about all the different stuff, and before you know it, we just sound like we're schizophrenic, right? I do 20 different things. Oh, so I'm trying to write a movie. Oh, I'm playing guitar now too, and yeah, it just can sound crazy. So... one thing I'm trying to get better at is, can you have a really concise statement, and not just like a concise, like blah statement, but can you say something that's like interesting? Like, can you actually get my attention with it as well? And I feel like that's something I'm trying to work on, because I could be like, I'm a web designer. That's pretty boring. It's pretty boring.
Kind of, yeah, no. It's like always good when you have like a story attached to it. I think we talked about it like the other day when we were at our coffee spot, and just like, okay, worked a little bit from the coffee shop and doing the network kind of sort of thing, what is like, work network. But the Dos Cocos Locos, I think we talked about. They had a really cool elevator pitch in the beginning, and it's like they sold coconuts on the beach, kind of, and it's like the couple that tried to escape the work grind, they were teachers, I think. And yeah, so I think like if you have a good story with a good hook, that goes a long way, because then people can relate to it, and it's like, oh yeah, I remember this guy, that web designer who actually is like living in two places, like St. Pete and Colorado, and I think that stuff like that, or like just attaching dreams and emotions to your story, is very powerful, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I love that you're saying, think of it as a story, right? Is with a good story, there's kind of a beginning, a middle, and end, or there's like sometimes a misdirect, and there's these things that kind of get you excited as they're telling stuff. So
like a good hook, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think for me, it's like comedy always comes in, right? Yeah. Like, I'm just not taking yourself too seriously. Like, I'll always remember like the first resume I ever made, like at the end of college, designing your own resume. And I think the ending of my like beginning statement, which on my resumes, I've always done this. I've always told people to do this on resumes, and it's funny how many people don't. Where like they'll just put their experience, their skills, but they don't put like a little statement at the top. Like, and I feel like that's important. The little statement of like who you are, like what, like give me a few sentences. And at the end of that, at the beginning, I had a statement that was something like, oh, and my favorite soda, and thanks for asking, my favorite soda is orange soda, or something like that. It just is out of nowhere, just bonkers. Because the whole thing, I'm like, I'm a team player, I can do all these things. And then like, and he's like, oh yeah, and my favorite orange soda is orange soda. And it was funny is because you think, oh, that's kind of all right, but then that actually on like the first interviews, people were like always commenting on like, oh, and you like orange soda, I see. Oh, that's funny. Yeah. And it's just a way of like
breaking the ice,
and
becoming a real person too, because like I think you said that like you don't hire people where you can't drink a beer with them, and I think that's very powerful, because like in the end you have to spend like 8 hours a day with that person, let's say if it's in office, and you got to hang out with them, you have to like them, and if you don't like them, this will be a very miserable time, and you probably choose the person who's not perfectly fit for the job over the guy that is like, oh yeah, I am a team player and I'm like a sociopath, whatever, and it's like, I slandered that one.
No, it's exactly right though. It's like you want to work with real people, and I think especially with creatives, you tend to have these things where you tend to have these like kind of creative people that they get kind of caught in their own mix a little too much, right? They get a little too intense, right? We all think we're like Da Vinci working by candlelight.
Yeah,
we're really intense, and those people, what's sad is they do the best work. Like they're some of the best creatives are like that, but I've seen so many of them just kind of fall to the wayside because people just didn't know how to connect to them. They didn't know.
That is, I think, like that is the dark side actually of being a creative. You live like a hermit crab. Like you want to work from home, you want to work where it's comfortable, you want to do it your way, and as soon as a client or somebody else has to like, hey, I don't pay for that and I don't want to do it this way, then it becomes a problem, and you have to adjust to the external world, and you cannot do your art your way. And with networking, it's very powerful because, like, you're going out there and you learn about other people. And it's not about you being in your cave and doing whatever you want to do. It's like, no, you have to reach out and be part of the community.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something that I need to do a lot better at. I always make the joke, I'm not really good at small talk. I'm really good at deep talk. I'm really good at like, let's talk about aliens on the moon. Let's talk about some crazy stuff. Like, and so it's hard, right? Because I don't like to talk about the weather. I don't like to be that guy, and so I feel like that's the funny skill is like, can you get better at the jazz of the moment, right? Like, so someone says something like, yeah, I just stepped in a puddle this morning, get out of the car, and can you now roll with that? Can you now come up with a story, or can you come? And I feel like that's the best connections I've ever made where like, can I come up with a connection, right? So like you're Fitz and you're like, hey, I do videography and I like to do kind of crazy videography, and can I then jive with that? Can I like give you something from that? Or can I just be like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah. That's nice. So I have a camera too on my phone.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, so you're doing that full time?
Exactly. And
the struggle is like so real, because like you gotta relate and you gotta have like hobbies, and like having hobbies and being relatable is really key for networking, for being hired, even like clients. Like they kind of like, do I associate myself with that person? So a presentation is kind of everything. And it's always good to be like on the know, like what's trending right now. Like for example, Last of Us.
Oh yeah. The Last of Us, just knowing just things that are like culturally big things, and right now The Last of Us is a huge thing, So, being able to kind of talk a little bit to that kind of these big things that are making big moves, and so for us, I think what's nice is we both have this kind of video game background too.
Yeah.
So we've talked about in the past, we have this kind of cyberpunk we talked about, and we both. Have you ever played the Last of Us game? I guess have you ever?
I got, I think, fortunate or not fortunate, because like everybody is basically saying Last of Us, the game was really really good, and I think like when you watch the first episode, boy does that stuff slam. That's like, it's a banger, like straight up, and I really dig it. And I'm like, then I watch the game, like the gameplay of the video, and I'm like, this is not actually as cinematic and intense as like the first episode. And I'm like, damn. Second episode too, like really, engaging. In the video game, for example, when they drive through the city and the zombies are breaking out, it's like you have an overview. It doesn't feel like as tight and like claustrophobic, because like you only see what the lens is capturing. In the video game, you see everything, like kind of third person, and there's like details missing, and it's not, you don't get that immersed in it.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and in the defense of the Last of Us game, I mean that came out in 2010. I mean that came out a while ago, and
100%. It's like when you write a book and you read the book, and then the movie's different, obviously.
The thing that's really interesting that I like about Last of Us, and is that it kind of, it really captures this like beauty in things. Like things can be really ugly and still be very beautiful. Even the game captures that really well. I'm really actually excited for upcoming scenes in the show that you haven't seen yet, but are in the game, that are really beautiful scenes, like very quiet scenes. It's almost like the game and the show, for that matter, really celebrates the quiet moments, right? When you watch something like The Walking Dead, for example, or any other zombie movie, there's not a lot of quiet. It's a lot of noise. It's a lot of running, screaming, things are going wrong. And The Last of Us, what's great, I mean, there's a whole episode that there's really no violence in most of the episode. It's just about, two men falling in love in the post-apocalyptic world.
How did you feel about that?
I felt great about it, because it was, what was interesting is, and I talked to an LGBTQ friend about this, of how, gay people are always shown in shows as sexy, young, goofy, funny.
Yeah.
You don't see the other end of the gay spectrum. You don't see the elder side of it. You don't see the
romantic side.
Yeah, the more romantic, sweet side. That actually isn't shown a lot in movies and shows, and a lot of people actually felt like this was one of the first real depictions that actually felt like a real thing.
Yeah.
And I think both actors are actually straight, which is kind of interesting. But
they are? I did not know.
I think they are.
Are you sure?
I may be wrong, but I think they are. But I may be wrong in that.
I'm not 100% sure. I thought he was like on the other side, but I
may be wrong. We don't have to get caught up in that.
Also, it does not really matter, to be quite honest. Like that is like perfect acting if you can play both, and people are getting confused about it. Because like then it's well played, Then you can't tell. Good acting,
Yeah, but I guess so to kind of zoom back to the kind of creative part of it, though, I think like what makes the show work is like these kind of quiet, beautiful spaces in the grunge. Like, can grunge look like good? So like one of my favorite bands growing up was 9 Inch Nails, for example, and a lot of the art on a lot of the albums of 9 Inch Nails is like zoomed in on like rust, zoom in on like dirt. Like if I go into like a dumpster where there's a chair that's been sitting there disintegrating, and then I take a macro photo of that mold that's growing on it, it's all these beautiful colors. It's this kind of spectrum of things. And I feel like The Last of Us really kind of celebrates that there's this kind of clean beauty that can always be there. So it's been really cool. And so being able to talk like something like that at a networking event, right?
Sorry, Rachel. Rachel.
It's like really important to like talk about the, you know, things like that. They're just like really new in the culture when you're at these networking events, right? So yeah, going to a networking event and being able to talk to someone about The Last of Us and talk about that beauty.
Yeah.
I think that stuff can be really cool, especially with other creatives and even clients. You know, I love connecting with clients on things that have nothing to do with what we're doing.
Yeah.
I even have one client, and I would not suggest this to people out there, where we actually kind of get into political debates, and it's actually kind of funny because yeah, he's straight up Republican.
Oh, we got coffee coming. Let's go. Look at that. Got the coffee.
And this is our new assistant Rachel. She's interning here. You know, we may keep her around. We're paying her minimum wage right now. So if anyone out there wants to buy anything, we'll start paying her more.
Yeah, this is our coffee break, by the way. So check out Sean's mug. Sean, this is your time to shine. Hold it up to the camera.
Yeah, this is my time to shine. My entire career has led me to this point. So these coffee cups are amazing. I mean, they have all these words, all the keywords you would need to know.
Buzzwords. You got to talk.
Buzzwords, keywords, whatever. You know, if you're in the SEO world, if you're not, I don't really care. I mean, you would love these words. I mean, if you just like to just stare at words all day while you drink your coffee, I know I do.
Yeah. So if you want, you can refuel. I will take over if you want to. You don't have to. But yeah, so it is a weird thing though for me, because like my problem is like I'm kind of like a workaholic in a weird way, and I don't watch sports, you know, and I'm not really the typical guy where I'm like, okay, I want to relate obviously to people, but I'm also like, I don't care consuming the stuff they consume. I'm very individual, you know, because like I'm more the extrovert, you know, I just do what I like and I'm fine either way how it turns out, you know. And some introverts, they're like, no, I need to align exactly with those people, so I gotta watch this and that. And I feel it's really important to be authentic to yourself, you know. So don't try to be like, oh, I'm gonna watch the Super Bowl because I'm a sports person, and you're actually not, you know. And if they drill you and they're like talking about certain things, they know you're not. So it's like
a great point. That's actually a really great point. Don't feel like you have to fake it. People will know really quickly. You know, if someone talked to us about something we're super passionate about, we'll know immediately that they're not, you know. But to counter that, I would also say that like it's nice to not know something. Some of the best ways that I can get people to open up to me is just me being like, oh, what is that? Tell me more. Oh, yeah? Okay. No, I don't know anything about it. Keep telling me. And it's like this kind of, and it's funny because it's cool. You get them kind of talking. They actually feel that you're interested. They get that empathy from you. Okay, wow, he's actually quieting down. He's letting me talk.
Yeah.
So yeah. So
on that note, though, like there's that book, How to Win and Influence People or whatever, you know, and it's basically about like how you have a conversation, and people love talking about themselves. Like, oh yeah, ask me how I did this job, because then I can tell you how well I designed this and what I thought about that. So that it's basically stroking their own ego if you ask the right questions. Obviously, there's a way of doing that ethically. And, you know, if you ask questions where you don't care, obviously, that's the wrong way to do it too, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know, asking good questions is good for any creative out there. You know, you have to be asking. So I don't think that has to go away when it's not talking about a project, right? How do I ask the good questions to get them talking about themselves? But how do you do that in a way that also seems like you genuinely care too? Because, you know, I have had people that have done these types of things, and it does still seem like a robot where they're just like, oh, yeah, tell me more.
Basically,
that's good. Great.
You become
Tell
a
me more.
You know?
Great. Like,
nobody wants to be like communicating with a chatbot if it's not genuine or leads to anything. So
one thing I even like to do, so I'm actually always testing people too. I'm testing possible clients too, because I don't want to work with people that I'm just not going to get along with either. So what I'll sometimes do is I'll throw a bomb in it. I'll kind of throw a grenade in it and be like, well, what if we did this though? Have you thought about this though? And then they're like, oh, and they're like shocked. Yeah. I like to do that too, because that's how I am to work with as a creative. I think you're the same way. If you like to just kind of be like, oh, wait, I just had an idea, and if they don't like that, they're not going to like working with you. So I like to kind of do that a little bit too at the beginning. Like, you're working with a creative like me who's going to be like, wait, I just had an idea, so I'm going to start doing that now. Like,
that
well,
flexibility.
What if we did that? Or wait, so I know you like The Last of Us, but did you play the game? Oh, you don't think the game's as good as the? Oh, I kind of disagree with that. So
yeah, I mean, like having opinions and being controversial and polarizing is really important, because that makes people remember you. Like, if you're too clean cut and agreeable, like, well, yeah, this is just like an ad in the background, you just don't remember it, because it's like, oh yeah, that person said this. If you can justify the opinion, man, you're getting remembered. You even with like making like reels, for example, you make a crazy hook or you say something controversial and you back it up and people can't understand it, then it goes viral. But if it's like, oh, he just said some clean cut things that everybody's agreeing on, like, yeah, well, I'm not watching this because like, why would I? It's like, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's okay too. So as you recommend things, you should watch The Last of Us. And I'm not really into that. I'm really into like comedy and stuff. I don't really like that stuff. It's okay to find those things. I'm kind of always telling people, I'm going to kind of go back in a dorky zone for a little bit. Sorry, everyone. Sometimes I just like I want to jump into like a dorky whirlpool, but
I have a whirlpool in the back. It's actually not clean.
We'll be right back over So to bring this into D&D just for a second, so the one thing I kind of always tell my players is friction's not always bad. So if the NPC is like, giving you a hard time or even one of the other players and you are like debating back and forth, that can sometimes be some of the coolest story there. Yeah. And so I'm always kind of telling people too is we always think of friction in society as a bad thing, that like, we need to have these like clean, but no, sometimes having like a debate is actually kind of cool. Like I know we do it all the time. I know half of this podcast is us debating.
Actually, you have no idea on the other side how different we can be, because like I think if you would describe yourself, you're like high quality work, very how would you describe yourself? In that,
here's my elevator pitch. Here we go.
No, I mean like in opposites of us,
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, I'm more of a planner. I think I like to have a plan of attack and like a blueprint before I go in. So if I was going to rob a bank, I would want to know like all of the HVAC system. I would want to know the sewer system. I would be staking it out for months and months. Where I feel like you're kind of the more You take advantage of things very quickly in the moment, which is still good. Both of these things are good. Where so if you were going to rob a bank, you'd be like, oh, I just noticed that security guard's shoe's untied, and oh, the HVAC system's out just for today, and then you would jump on that. So I feel like that's where our differences is I'm kind of this planning mindset, and you're kind of this like, now's the time, get it now before we miss it.
Yeah, so that is also like one of the things where I'm like, yeah, we have differences, and that is a good thing, because there needs to be like, if we are both the same person, even though some people say we're twins for whatever reason, like comment down below if you look similar, because I don't think so, but
comment who should be more offended by that, him or me.
But yeah, on that note, I'm just like, there needs to be some tension, and that's a good thing. And I'm like, I'm high volume. Let's just experiment and let's just create and whatever. Don't care about the quality, volume, repetition, And you're like, no, this has to be like, and we pendle in somewhere in the middle, and that is also very, very strong and important, because some people are like, if you don't get repetition, you don't grow and you don't learn, because like some things you only learn after posting 100 times, because like in the beginning, doing a podcast is easy, it's like, oh, this is exciting, let's do this. But did you do podcast number 10 where you're like, you don't feel like it? And what is the feeling after like episode 50? What is the feeling after like episode 100, for example? There's like different pains, Maybe you have a better opportunity over there. Maybe you have this and that. And it's like relationships. The first 3 months, first 6 months, nice. The first fight,
So that's a great point. So I guess to bring it to our podcast, what would you say is the biggest thing that's kind of popped up after 30 episodes that wasn't there in the first episodes, I guess? Like what's like a new problem that we're trying to solve now that we weren't necessarily solving in those first episodes?
So that is what I'm like, I feel like getting used to things, like we talked about, like, oh, there's AI coming, and that's not one of your favorite topics. I think it's very important, because obviously it's coming up all the time and changing the market, the industry, and everything. Obviously, it's in some ways not that revolutionary as some people might think. Like, it's not like, oh, you're jobless now, like it's moving and it's doing things, but it's not that important. But getting used to things is one of the human super strengths, and I'm like, I want to get used to AI and the tools so that I can use them, and I can basically become part of it and adapt to it. but the adapting of like, oh, this is what we're doing, this is how much time it takes. You don't see the upsides anymore. You're just like getting numb to everything, and you don't see the positives. Like, that's why I'm like, you always have to zoom out and compare, like, oh, this is the first week and this is now week that, and what does the graph say? Does the graph say it's going up, or does the graph say it's stagnant? And what is like the real results, like in money, cost, and whatever? And what are the features? What is like the overall system, you know? If the system is evolving, you know, like it could be like from one day on the other that you make way more money because like, oh, we have the system in place to handle a viral clip and monetize it. You know, you could get tomorrow a viral clip and now we have like 500,000 views. Some of them maybe buy a mug, you know? And on that note, buy a mug.
Buy a mug, everybody. Prices are going to be going up soon. So get a mug. Shipping is free still, but I can't keep it free for too much longer. So come on, get one while you can.
Yeah, so that's what I feel like is like the problem. We're getting used to things, and the workload and the evolution slowed a little bit down because like private stress or like things going on in the background, you know. And but obviously there's good and bad times, and we just have to adjust to it and then make the best out of it, adapt and overcome.
Yeah. Well, that was a very long-winded way of us kind of getting to this place of like, so we need both energies, right? We need to keep moving and changing. I know, we kind of talk about AI. What's really interesting about AI and just any topic in general, right, is that a lot of people, and I see this in the podcast world, is that we all kind of just gather around these topics, right? So one year it was NFTs, and now this year it's this, and who knows, next year it'll be something else. And it's kind of funny that we all kind of gather and focus around these kind of core topics. And I guess that's where I'm always trying to fight. So in this podcast, if anyone ever feels that I'm kind of pushing back on the AI topics and things like that, I think that's where my mind, when I was a young creative, is I was always just doing things that were different than other people, sometimes because they were different than other people. And that is not necessarily a great way to live either, but I'm just always really attracted by the things that not everyone's looking at. Yeah. I always, I think me as a creative, I'm always like really interested in like, what are the things that not anyone's talking about, and can we uncover something that's really cool that nobody's really thought of? And, so with AI, it's really interesting because it's a lot of us that a year ago were not artificial intelligence experts, and now we're all talking seemingly about artificial intelligence.
Yeah. I think like though on that note, it's like you cannot hide from the future, you know? You are very like old school. I want to make real art. I want to do the hand-drawn paintings, what you do, what is really amazing. Yeah. And then there's the other way where it's like I want to have the newest of the newest. That's me kind of, where I'm like, I want the newest camera, I want to have this toy, I want to have that toy, and I want to, like there's the polarization, the new, the old, and both ways make sense, and both ways have a path. And I feel like on that note, it's like there's no right or wrong. It's just like being flexible and at least knowing what's going on. Our goal here is not to tell you, hey, outsource everything to AI, or hey, do everything by hand. Could be good advice, could be bad advice. You got to decide that for yourself.
Yeah. It's what's it really interesting, and if I ever taught like a design class or something, I would probably do it this way too. So when I was in art school, we would have these like large projects, and the first day of the project was always really interesting because everyone was always really excited. It was usually like a really cool project. And it was funny because the teacher would, the first hour or two of class, they would be teaching us some of the concepts, like how are you going to start this project, things like that. Go around, maybe ask the teams, what are you going to do? But then he would say, you can do whatever you want. You can stay in class, you can go, you can leave if you want. I don't really care. You have the rest of the day to work on this. This is a studio time where you have 6 or 7 hours. Do what you need to do. And what was really interesting is everything up to that moment, all of us creatives were on this track, right? So we were staying in class, we were doing the activities, but then at that moment, we blew up in a million different directions, right?
Gotcha.
Some people were like, hey, I'm going to go smoke a doobie at home. I ain't going to do anything. Some people were like, I'm going to stay here in the classroom. I'm going to work real hard. And some people were like, let's go out in the world. Let's check it out.
Yeah.
And what's really cool about that is you do see that like there really is a billion ways to solve all these creative problems that we have. Like there really is. Like, and right now I think everyone's like, AI is like becoming this kind of funnel for a lot of people where it's like there's so many different things. I'm constantly, and the thing I love about what you do is that you are always opening up new doors. You're
Yeah.
always like, there is this new thing that's barely anyone really knows, but I'm gonna try it. Like, why not?
Yeah, I think that is like one of the things where I decided, like I think like 3 or 4 years ago, or no, probably more. Like kids have like a really crazy advantage. They grow up and they're just like, let's try this out. You know, there's like you hear about that 18-year-old drop shipping guy who's like found this cool website, everything worked really well, and they just tried things out. You know, and they're like playful. And we as humans need to play. You cannot just like, okay, I'm doing everything the old way, because then you become antiquated and replaced, you know. And the kids, they're just testing things out, and they will find something that works better, and they're like, why would you ever use that, you know?
Yeah, there's really something very beautiful about the ignorance you have at the beginning of your career, right? There really is. I mean, when I went into art school, I just like thought the world was my oyster. I was just like, I can.
It is though. It
is. And you know, and it got beaten out of me. It took a while for it to get beaten out of me. It was a couple of years of me working like
first corporate job. We got you.
Yeah, it was like I mean, I worked like 16, 20 hours during art school, like, you know, a day. You know, I was getting 3 to 4 hours of sleep. I was just going nonstop. I had four jobs, full-time job. I was somehow painting on the side, you know, somehow clubbing, doing all these other things too. And so it you know, so it got kind of beaten out of me, and and I got to a deep depression place by the end of college. And I see this a lot with creatives, where they get to this place where I used to think I could do it all, and now I haven't gotten there. We're not there now. I didn't get the success.
Life kind of made you numb. That's what I feel like. That is like the adapting. You know, you adapt to real life, and it's like, okay, I'm got beaten out of it, and I'm adapting to the situation to deal with it, and I'm like, that's fine. Mm-hmm. But being like different and trying to break out is really key. And I feel like that is like a thing that you have to force yourself. That is the networking, for example. All the fears that you build up because like you're used to something a certain way.
Yeah.
They make you stubborn and going in one direction. Like you have a company, you're a freelancer, you do things like for 5 years the same way. Mm-hmm. Somewhere out of the blue comes like somebody, oh, I'm starting my own business, and he's taking all your clients just because he found a new, better way. Having the Dunning-Kruger effect makes you do things that you otherwise not do, you know? For people who don't know, Dunning-Kruger effect, in the beginning you think you know everything, and that allows you to actually play with it instead of being intimidated and being like, actually, I know nothing about that, and I will not be able to compete with the experts. You know, Dunning-Kruger effect is a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, and I mean, yet again, to kind of bring it back, because I love to just bring things in nerdy places for no apparent reason. You know, like, have you ever like picked up a video game for the first time that your friend's been playing, and then you beat them?
No.
Have you ever done that?
Not for the first time, but I'm like, I found out like randomly, like, oh, you play StarCraft? Oh, let's play. Because like I'm terrible with like new things, but I play and experiment a lot, and then I become good over time. Mm-hmm. Where other people, they're good in the beginning, but they stagnate and then stay the same level.
So yeah, so where I was getting to that is it's just really funny, like when you do that, because it's just a good example of they thought they figured out how to play the game, but then you don't know the rules you're breaking. And so so the first time I ever, what game was it? It was what was it? It was it was maybe Fortnite. It was either Fortnite, it was one of those games. And I won the first one. It was like the first one I ever played at Fortnite. I got first place. And my friend was so mad. And it's because I did weird stuff. I did He was like, why didn't you run to the house? No, get that weapon. I'm like, nah, man, I'm going to go over here and not get a weapon. And I did all these weird things. But I ended up winning because I did something so weird. All the other players didn't know how to even come at me because I was just being weird.
Yeah. I mean, on that note, like if the enemy doesn't, if you don't know what you're doing, the enemy doesn't know what you're doing. What is good in being predictable? You know, like sometimes it's good to being unpredictable. Keep people guessing, try new things out. And it's like, oh, I thought you're going to the network event and you actually decided to go working, you know. Whatever you release to the universe, whatever you release to the universe, you will get something out of it, you know. And there's a lot of haters who are trying to like demotivate you. Oh, you said you did this. How did that go? Oh, it did not go well. You know, they're basically trying to shit on your parade, you know, in one way or another. And sometimes it's good to just hustle and do things, you know. And sometimes it's good to being not organized versus like, oh, you have a calendar. So if you follow the calendar as you planned, you will maybe make like $5,000 in 2 months. But if you do creative ways, there's maybe a completely different way, and you make double, triple. Like, but you would not figure that out if you would not tried something new.
Yeah, and so with that being said, it's like, yeah, like if you don't know, if you don't live in a world and you don't know how to operate in that world, yeah, don't be afraid to dive in, because you may actually do better than anyone there. You may be terrible at networking, but you go to a networking event and you may do better than anyone else. I mean, to use an example, I think we've talked about this before. When I met you and Rachel, it was at a meetup, right? I was nervous as hell going to that meetup. I almost didn't go that day. I was almost talking myself out of not going. I was like, I'm not going to go. And my friend who I was living with, he's like, dude, just go. You didn't move to Florida to not go anywhere.
Exactly.
I was like, yeah, good point. Okay. So I went there nervous. I was like, God, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do. That night, I mean, I got a job. I got work that ended up paying me about $4,000 a month. I met you and Rachel.
Nice.
I met a few other creatives, all from one night. So, and you know what got me all those things? I'll tell you what. It was so when they got done doing their spiel, they were talking about UX, UI design, all this design stuff, and you guys were kind of there. You didn't really necessarily match, but
yeah, we were like, design. Why is it not just design?
But there was pizza and beer, so you were having a great old time.
I was so stoked. I was like, okay, networking event. They got pizza, they got beer. I'm hooked. I don't care about like the social pressure. I'm like, oh yeah, there's beer and pizza. I'm just like eating, and I'm fine.
Yeah. So when I met Fitz, I just got to meet like this kind of drunk German who's like, woohoo! And but anyway, but so after he got done doing his talk, he was like, oh, he wanted to go around the room and everyone. He's like, man, there's lots of new faces here, and who's the first person they point at? It's me. And everyone kind of just looks at me. Everyone does that thing. So for anyone with social anxiety, that's the moment that they're terrified.
Nightmare.
That's the worst possible thing. So what I say, I was like in the middle of a drink, and I was like, I'm just the janitor, guys. If you guys could all make sure to use the trash can, and everyone laughed because they were like, oh, clearly he's not the janitor. But I kind of just did that funny, goofy joke, and that alone just made everyone laugh in the whole room. And now it was okay. From that moment forward, I was okay. But if I had gone to networking events all the time and stuff, would I have made that joke? Maybe not. So making that kind of weird, goofy joke like can only really happen if I'm in this state of uncomfortableness, right? If I'm just comfortable, maybe I wouldn't make those kind of jokes. So I think that's a good example of like going into something super uncomfortable may actually put you in a creative space to do stuff more creative than the people that are super relaxed and do it all the time.
Yeah, true. I mean, there is no right or wrong way, and as long as you keep on doing and evolving and learning, you will go in the right direction. The problem is like many people become stagnant. They work the job for 5 or 10 years, like the old school people, and they're like, okay, now things have changed. I cannot be a trucker anymore because there's a self-driving Tesla truck, for example.
Yeah.
That is a terrible and scary thing. Obviously, in a community, we all have to stick together, support the weak, but you also have to experiment. Like, you cannot live life on autopilot and wonder, oh, I just worked my 40 weeks and I didn't adjust to anything, and there's a new hire. He put like 45 hours in and he worked at home like 5 hours and learned new things, became more valuable. The market changed, and the person who just worked the 40 hours does not know the market changed, and was like, I'm lacking a skill set. I'm without a job. It's not like that you should dedicate your whole life to only work, but there needs to be a right balance, because there's new things. Change is inevitable or whatever.
Yeah. Well, no, exactly. I mean, there's nothing more terrifying than when you've been comfortable for years, and then all of a sudden, sorry, man, we're going to have to let you go. And now you're in this place of like, oh, I now have to be uncomfortable. And, so there's a big argument to be made about like, you should kind of always be in a state of uncomfort, So if you work that job, and you're working 40 hours, you're tired, it's Friday, but there's like, it's first Friday, let's say, and
you hit the boss,
and you're trying to do art on the side, but you have a full-time job, and you're like, I'm just so tired, I'm so drained, but tonight's first Friday. Try to get yourself to go, even just for a bit, because that uncomfortableness. If you on that same Friday, if you got told we're gonna have to let you go, it'd be a whole different world. So you almost have to put yourself there. Pretend that you don't have that job. Pretend that you have to be uncomfortable. And I've said this before too. And I kind of am just talking about networking event, which is more just talking about myself and my fear of networking events and things. But the idea that you can just go for a little bit. That there's room around it. It's not this concrete thing that you have to do good. That there's this grade that you're going to get at the end of it. just showing up a lot of the time does so much good.
Showing up is like 80% of the work. Like the another thing is like with like, let's say, jobs and being fired right now, this is like a big topic because people are like, oh, I need a job, I need to apply somewhere, and I need to do this and that. I cannot work freelance because like, what if like I'm getting don't get work? The same thing is like for you're not in control over your boss, how he gets his clients. People think if they work like a full-time job, they're safe. You're never safe. This is life, and life is always twisted and weird, you know. There could be a Zoom call for a big company and they let 10,000 people go. Happened. Like, that's not a big deal.
Yeah.
You know, if you're a freelancer, you're kind of in the control of like, this is the actions that I take to get new clients. For example, you could prospect and like go into groups, meetups, and try to see what is the market like. Ask somebody, hey, how are you feeling about hiring right now? What is like what you usually spend on a website? What is usually the budget for a video project? You got somebody? Oh, you're good question. Actually, never done that, you know. And now you got a client. There's like things you can do to control your situation. And if you're an employee, usually work is split up into like multiple sections. Like there's the marketing, there's the sales, and yada yada yada, you know. Everything's split up. Nobody is actually in full control and is able to handle the full business. As a freelancer, you have to learn everything, and you're only as good as your weakest point. What is bad and good at the same time.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean yeah, with that being said too, I would always kind of just tell people to just you know, have your side gigs, have your side hustles, have your passion projects. Those are what's going to get you through the bad times. I can't tell you how many times that I've had something happen and then I go hang out with my friends or something that I do anyways. Like, so for me, disc golfing's been a big thing. We're just going to hit all the dorky points today in my life.
Disc golfing is not the dorky.
It's a little dorky. Yeah, it's like the outdoor dorkiness. But yeah, you know, so
it's like people with hobbies. I am as a gamer outside.
Yeah, and so, you know, but yeah, so I remember, you know, I've had things happen where I'm just like, God, how am I even going to get over this in my professional career? And then I go out with the guys and play a couple of rounds of disc golf, and by the end of it, they're like, hey man, I'll help you out. Hey, I'll hook you up with this guy or this thing.
Yeah.
And that would have never happened if I just, you know, stayed inside and was like, the solution is to get better. I'll just get better at design. That's the solution. I wouldn't necessarily have that. So sometimes it's the funny solutions. I knew a guy once that he got fired from a career he had built over 20 years, and he got pushed out in the ugliest way. And I hope this never happens to anyone out there listening. It's never really happened to me, and it just seems like one of the worst things in the world. To just here's your cardboard box. No, you cannot go back to your desk. We're going to escort you out the whole 9 yards. Just terrible. just tore the man down.
Escorting out as if you would throw a fit, you know?
Yeah, from a company he built. You know, he had started it with like only a few employees, and he got escorted out once it was 100 employees, and it just super embarrassing,
disgusting.
And what really did the guy in is that he didn't have any hobbies. He didn't do anything else on the side, and I, you know, and he even agreed to me like a year later when we talked about it, because he went into a very deep depression. I had to try to help him through. And you know, what it ended up being is I told him, you know, man, if you would have had like a poker night, if you would have had just a thing with the boys that week, it would have helped you out so much, right? To be fired, but then go hang out with the guys and then be like, dude, you're fine. You're going to get by it, because you need to hear that. But if you don't have those goofy things on the side, then you're just in an echo chamber. You're just, you know, if the job doesn't work out, then you're just by yourself and you feel isolated when you're not, but you still feel that way. So it's really important to have kind of the goofy side things, because then, you know, so for me, it's like Dungeons and Dragons and things like that, where like I can't show up to Dungeons and Dragons and cry about losing my job. It's like, no, man, get in it. You're an elf today. Be an elf. And it's like,
even if you say like, oh man, I lost my job, and you're just playing a game and everybody sees you down, you know, like sometimes you get random hookups, you know. I went, for example, like when I arrived in America, I'm like at the gas station looking for jobs, driving around, and like had an application full in my hand. I don't even know how it happened. He's like, oh, I like your accent. Where you from? And I'm like, quick small talk, and then random guy met at the gas station. Hey, here's my phone number. Call me. I hook you up, you know. And I'm like, oh, I got my first lead for a job. Obviously not freelancing or anything. And then I'm like while dating, whatever, doing the whole Tinder shenanigans thing, you know.
Yeah.
Basically,
another good networking stream, I guess.
Yeah, no, like for real. I got invited to a birthday party. One of the guys liked me but he also liked the girl that I was like trying to date. He hooked me up with like a job at the airport, and I'm like, oh, You know, it's always weird side hookups, that you get when you interact with the community, and they will look out for you. And obviously, everybody has their own interest, but sometimes if it doesn't cost you anything, they're like, "Yeah, I like this guy. Why not throw him a bone?"
Yeah, yeah, and it's about making yourself available to that. I mean, for me, it's like, I think this is where you do much better than me. So you're kind of loose and freeness makes you very available to fit into stuff. Like, you seem very jello-y, like I could fit you. Or people like me, I think we have a harder time where, we're like everything's so planned and constructed. Some people are just kind of like, I don't know how to fit you into what I do. You have it. You're too solid,
Yeah.
So one thing I know I'm working on is just showing people are more malleable. I think the way that I get people excited is the fact that I'll just start sharing ideas. Like I don't really care about giving you an idea. Like so like if you're like yeah we're doing this and this, we're trying to figure out how to get in this market. I'm like, oh yeah, well have you thought of this? And they're like, whoa. And I'll tell you what, man, if you're creative and you're like, I don't know how to impress people, just come up with cool ideas and give them away freely. I can't tell you how important that is to break the ice, especially to someone who's like a big business person where they're like, I had to pay a guy $100,000 a year to get that answer. And you just gave it to me in the first few minutes of us drinking, like that's where they're like, dude, you're cool. I want you in my mix. I want you to come and have better. So it's funny. Some of my clients now, it's really funny where like they just, a lot of them, will be like, yeah, let's go have a meeting. I'll buy you a glass of whiskey. Let's go have a meeting. And it's funny because like most of the meeting is them just trying to kind of like get to that place where I'm giving that free idea to them and stuff, and it's not in a bad way, like they're using me, but it's funny because it's like they're just like, we just got to get Sean to produce more cool ideas.
Yeah. I mean, on that note, it's like that is like having that mix in that culture. That is like you need that craziness, you need that experimentation, and that's like one of the things. Never try to get too stagnant because like I am like very, like you said, jelly, and I'm not judgmental. So if somebody is doing something new, I'm like, oh, this is interesting, and I pay attention because like people that experiment, they maybe find something out, and even if you replicate it, maybe it does not work, but you have to be open to at least test it a couple times and see what can I make with that. How do you abuse the new system? Because that's how you get like the loopholes. People who see patterns and loopholes, they are my favorite. I find them so interesting. There's people who do speed runs in video games, and they're just like, oh yeah, that video game where you spend like 40 hours on, I spend actually also 40 hours on, instead of like playing it a regular way. I broke the game and I finished the video game in 2 minutes. I'm like, this is impossible. How do you finish a video game in 2 minutes? Like that category on YouTube, for example, I love that. When people think outside of the box and exactly doing something unreasonable long to glitch out the game to get a different result. So, and you can apply that in real life too, like sending out one ad and it's not doing anything, but sending out 100 ads or 1,000 or 10,000 or paying for ads, there's so many ways, and we don't know it all, and we have to experiment more.
Yeah, experiment. You said it right there. That's exactly what I was going to say, is you have to set up a space for experimentation. I mean, all the best kind of client projects I have, we've set up the space of like, experiment. Let's just see if it goes. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But let's just keep our experiments cheap and keep working. And why not? So one of my clients, I helped him expand into they kind of the becoming a national nonprofit. So he, so we had done great in Colorado. When we had literally since the time I started, I think we had increased their donations tenfold. So it was going amazing, and he wanted to go national. And we both had like a few glasses of whiskey and figured out like
one thing led to the other.
One thing led to another. Well, now no, but we literally figured out like, how do we experiment with this? Like how do we get you to a national level? And the entire time it's been really cool of like, well, why don't we make press releases and send it to the media stations? Worst case scenario, they don't do anything. Best case scenario, they run the story. So just this last year, it was last year. We were able to go from 1 state to 35 states. This year, we're going to be in 45 states. Next year, hopefully 50 states. What's good about that is, so in Colorado now, he has competition that moved in this last year for that donation money. So if he hadn't done that, if we hadn't been experimenting, if we hadn't thought outside the box, and we're like, you know what, we're good in Colorado, we'll keep going. This would be scary now. But we just talked about it. We're like, you know what? Even if we take out Colorado, you're still making 10 times more than you were before. So it's like, if you could set up that experimenting, you can get ahead of it. You can get ahead of the tidal wave.
On that note, also, like, sometimes, like, let's talk about competition, because, like, obviously everybody has competition, and it's always good to just, like, okay, let's check out the market. What do they do? Do they do now reels? What do they do? You know, like, that's my favorite. Like, when I have a client, I'm like, I do a full deep dive on them. I'm like, do they do YouTube? Do they do TikTok? Do they do that? Do they this? And what do other people do? Like, in the same niche, I'm like, can I actually replicate that? Can I do that for them? And, like, if you have a client who doesn't do anything of that, you kind of found gold if they see the value in it, you know? And then it's like, oh, you don't do the reels, but if you would do reels, you would get like at least 10,000 views or a day, you know, if you post like enough stories, or you even more, you know, or run ads, or there's so many things where you can see like, oh, somebody is not doing what other people do. And that are the things where you have leverage if you can provide the skill to actually allow them to do whatever they want to do.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. The only caveat I would maybe say to that is don't assume that they haven't thought of those things too before. I've gotten trouble in the past of coming in and be like, yeah, well, why don't you do this? And they're like, for very good reasons, actually. And you're like, okay, sorry.
But that doesn't mean that they are right. That's another thing too, though. You know, like the client is not always right, because like having an online store can be very valuable, you know, if you get a viral video, and having an online store where you're not having the audience or not going viral, then it's just a cost. It's really depending. Like paying a videographer, like let's say $1,000, and you have like a professional yoga video, and you don't make any money on the back end, it's not worth it. But having the back end set up, like you have a course to sell that you can promote via ad campaign, and if it's really thought out, you know, with a good funnel and a good system, it's totally worth it. You can make 10,000 or 100,000 of it. But having the option and seeing like what is possible is really important, and seeing what the client does with it is the other way. You know, it's the other thing.
Yeah. And one thing I would say that I think is a very good example of someone who's very experienced in marketing and design and things like that is not just an ability of like, let's add new things, but maybe sometimes there's things that need to be taken away. Sometimes you come into a company that's doing something, you're like, you know what, you really shouldn't do reels. You're wasting a lot of time making these reels. You're paying this videographer all this money, and that's not really what your customers care about. You're not finding your customers on Instagram, so why are you doing it on Instagram? You're looking for the old woman with $100,000. She's not on Instagram looking at reels of... So sometimes taking away is also important. I think we're in a society where we just think, oh, just add more. We'll just do another thing. We'll just add more content. If we just saturate with content that does good, not necessarily, not all the time.
Yes and no. And here we are disagreeing on everything, you know, because like you're right on the one side, you know, and there's obviously mediums that perform better. But I feel like on a numbers game and doing no marketing is terrible, you know? Yeah. And let's say you do Instagram in a market that is not your where your clientele hangs around, you know? Still people around you will consume the content and it will swap over. That is...
In theory.
Because like people are like, hey, you should do that. Even
not necessarily.
Like, even people just showing that, hey, they do this. And the person seeing that and like, oh, that is a thing. Even though they don't book it, they're like, oh yeah, maybe I should get a designer for my house, for example.
Maybe. I mean, that's an assumption, right? You don't necessarily know that, right? How many Apple ads do you see on Reels? How many, you know, not all these companies. It's not like, no, not really. I mean, you don't see Apple's, you know, they're not doing a lot of user content and stuff. And why don't they? But the
users do it for them. And they run the ads on like, you know, like they have the benefit of like their marketing is like users are doing the marketing for them because they have generated so much hype. You know, and to get to that point, somebody had to do the advertising, and obviously Apple is spending big bucks on advertising, kind of, you know, and that's like one of the things where I'm like, yeah, that is marketing is important. It's one of the key features, and I think there's like the only bad marketing is no marketing in a way.
Yeah. I would say that. I would say, you know,
the medium, how it is presented is you can fight over it, you know, but marketing needs to be there. If it's word of mouth, if it's, and if other people see it on social media, that is word of mouth as well, because they will talk about it then.
And yeah, so
especially with the Apple example, even though they don't do it, they are still on social media.
Yes, but they're not putting in all their eggs into like, we need to have influencers. I'm sure their influencer list is not very big at all. Because they don't really need it. They want to put their money in other places. That's the thing about marketing. What I would tell people, neither of us are marketing majors, by the way. Neither of us are marketing directors. But what I would tell people is that you need to be very strategic and tactical with things.
100%.
I can't tell you how many client meetings, branding meetings, where I'm like, okay, well, what's your target customer? Well, we want anyone we can get, and I'm like, that's not the way to go, because that no one's going to care about
unless you sell toilet paper.
Unless you sell toilet paper, and so you have to have a perfect customer. What is the perfect customer?
Yeah.
Okay, it's not the girl on Instagram that does the story because she's only got $10 in her pocket. No, if your product is a $10,000 thing, then don't put your money in those things. You need to then put your money where those $10,000 people are. Maybe it's even really unsexy things, right? Maybe it's just putting your logo on an event, but that event's full of people with wallets, way more than on Instagram.
Yeah.
So I think it's that too. It's and with that being said, I think it's funny with marketing. I do want to say, and I've been guilty of this, we all like to swerve into the marketing lane. And I think for everyone out there, you should have, if you want to figure out who's a good contact I should have, what's my first good contact, I would say a marketing person. If you're a video person, if you're a web designer, you should know someone who actually knows marketing and does it 100% of the time.
That's a good point.
But yeah, so with everyone out there, we're neither of us are marketing focused, but we're marketing adjacent.
Yeah.
But I think it's all about stuff being very tactical. You always have to have some type of reasoning, and with that being said, you always have to have reasoning even when you're not doing planning. So you can have a reason to not plan either.
Yeah.
But there has to be tactical.
I completely agree on that note, because obviously we're very different and we have different viewpoints, like the AI, the old school, new school, whatever. And I'm back to differ as always, sometimes. And I'm just like, me as doing video work, and it's like the new algorithm is like completely different, videos only go viral now if they're relatable to the masses. So back in the day, it was like you have to niche down, and now you're like, you can't make niche content because if 90% of the viewers don't like your video, and they're random viewers because it needs to go as viral as possible, so the most amount of people need to be finding that type of content interesting, will not engage with that because it's too niche, you will not grow. Right. Obviously, you will establish the dominance in the niche for the people who see that type of content. But that is one of the things that I learned in that it was kind of networking event, but I paid for it, so I'm like, oh, they're teaching me about how to make TikTok reels and go ultra viral and yada yada yada, and I'm like, I did not thought about that. So, and the concept that they had was, for example, you do one niche content and then the rest is ultra relatable to 10 people, so one niche and then 10 other videos that are more relatable, even though it's why should I do now if I sell shoes, make content about what is my dating stories, what doesn't sound relatable or related, but people will watch oh, now this person does this too, and then
you're speaking to a really
niche
a really important give and take that does have to happen, right? So if you want to be a key person of influence, then you need to have something that you are a master of, right? And every time you veer out of that lane, you lose that. You can't. So I know a lot of creatives, including myself, that really mess themselves up because you do leave your lane. You think, oh well, I know more, but each time you get out of that lane, you're actually taking a bit of your mastery away.
Yeah.
Right? It'd be like Da Vinci talking about fishing. Oh, well, now I'm not thinking about his painting. What do you do?
But
he's a bad example because he did a lot of different stuff, but he did them still in the same kind of realm. But I guess the point I'm getting at is that there is that give and take where you want to So the reason you want to give really good content that everyone can relate to is you're trying to bring people into your loop. You're trying to grab more people, and especially with these algorithms, that's the one thing I really don't like about us being very algorithm driven is more about numbers, not much more about impact. It's all about numbers. We just break these things down. If we have more views, that means we're doing better. Oh, if we have more people watching the videos, that means we're doing better. But not necessarily. I mean, there really is a case to being said. If 5 right people watch your video, it's better than 100,000 people watching your video and not not doing anything.
Yeah, on the way, I agree. On that note, it's like I feel on the one side though, the new social media thing is networking as well, and it is kind of not the old school way. Like the old school way is like you have that in-person, real, authentic experience. You connect with that person, like, oh, we shook hands, we had the same, you like fishing, I like fishing, and now on social media is like you make the same connection. Obviously it's not as effective, but if you make a fishing video as a web designer and another client who is like, oh, I'm big into fishing, they will like you and book you just because, like, I know a guy who likes fishing and I need a website, and you maybe just close that connection even though you did not content that is not related to web design, but you made 1 or 10 pieces of and this is like that weird thing where it's like there's a change happening right now in society where the networking is kind of done on social media, and it is a must-have in my opinion, where it's like you need to do it, you need to show who you are, what you believe. You basically have to have the Super Bowl sports talk on social media, and then do one piece of content that is very niche related in your job, and then there's like, this is a guy that I want to drink beer with, but you hire him for whatever.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it just comes down to passion. I think that's the biggest thing for people. So even if you like to do something that doesn't relate to what you do, as long as you love it, right? It's just like, what I'd caution people is like, if baseball is in today, but you don't know anything about baseball, then don't fake it. Don't, just because you want to get more views, don't do that.
But that's what I mean. Like, that is the networking part. So the Reels and the YouTube or whatever you do, and it is not really related to your brand or your company, that kind of shows who you are, and that makes people connect to you.
And
that's what I'm like. That is one of the new ways of marketing. I don't really like it because it's like, on the one side, it's like, oh, you don't have to niche down anymore, and you just have to do a little bit about your, like, oh, this is my content that I make, and
well, it's just realizing what the niche is. It's not that you don't need to niche down. It's just that figuring out that the niche could just be your love of something, your love of something else, and then getting in the center of that, So if I like baseball and I love web design, then maybe I want to make baseball websites, So then there's a niche. So it's not that you're getting rid of niches. It's just like, before you were thinking of niching, you were thinking of like, well, I'm a web designer. Well, maybe I'm just a form designer. Well, actually, maybe I'm just a back-end designer. So so the niching was just getting too deep into the thing. But now it's like the niche is like, actually zoom out. What other things do you like? Cooking? Do you like videos and cooking? Okay, boom. Like,
that's what I kind of like. It's like the inverted way of the funnel. Like back in the day, it was like on YouTube, you had to niche down, and you have to make 50 pieces of content on that niche, and then you go down, 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 and now it's the reverse. The more relatable you are, the more viral you get. Yeah. So that is like kind of the weird thing. And on the one side, I did not like the niching because like I cannot identify with like, I design forums and that is my niche, for example. Now it's the opposite. Now you have to do the 180. Like, I actually like cooking and this is how I do my fajitas, and I also am a web designer. Kind of, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Instead of the old terminology of verticals, they're horizontals now, which is really interesting. So people in the business world, they always talk about verticals, and so now it's like, your verticals have become horizontal, which is cool. So I mean, to wrap this up, I know we have to get out of here sort of soon, but I think we're gonna have a couple more live podcasts here together, and I think the funnest thing on this is always going to be that kind of debate, right? Of like the loosey goosey versus the more rigid, the kind of, do we niche? Do we not niche?
Old school, new school, or like AI, not AI. There's so many different views that we have. But it's a good thing.
But the biggest thing I think we definitely can agree on, though, is be engaged, do stuff, 100% do it too, lean into it, 100% lean into it. Like I talk about dorky stuff on here, and I lean into those things.
That is like the one thing where we agreed on. You cannot talk about sports if you don't like sports.
Yeah,
be real.
Yeah, be real. That's 100% because if we all just act like we're all super tight and stuff, it's you actually become blah, you become vanilla. So be chocolate, be crazy.
So on that note, guys,
be creative
and subscribe and have a good one.
See you, everyone.